What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another position group breakdown, and today we are taking a look at the interior defensive line for the Detroit Lions heading into the 2023 offseason. So let's get it started.
Fired up. It's made a great decision.
Great teammates, coaches, and other people who want to be Super Bowl champions. And we are. We're going to do it this year.
And we're going places because we want to go places.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here, and we are back, man, with another positional breakdown. Quickly, if you guys did not see the last video, the cornerback video, I know it was a long one, but in this series, what we do is we take a look at each positional group. We preview those positional groups heading into free agency and the draft by taking a look at players that are either under contract, still going into next season, or were with the team to end the season and they are no longer under contract, whether they're unrestricted, restricted, exclusive rights, whatever it may be, those upcoming free agents. We take a look at the positional group, talk about maybe if this guy should be re-signed or not re-signed, and then on top of that, what does that mean the need level is then for that positional group. And notice I said interior defensive line. This does not include edge rushers because this video would be extremely long. Also, on top of that, I do feel like edge rusher is kind of set. I mean, we'll talk about it when we get there, but a lot of guys are under contract, so we'll discuss that when we get to that video. But I think we're knocking out two of the most questioned positional groups heading into this offseason. However, in saying that, there is one technical edge rusher that's included in this video, not to the same extent, but because I view him as a mysterious option for the Detroit Lions. I'm not really sure what their plan is for this player or how they plan to utilize him, but as we know, that could affect how the Lions approach this offseason as a whole for this positional group. It could change everything for the Lions. Then on top of that, you also have the fact that over the last 2 years, because of injuries and different things like that, we've had to adjust on the fly, which is probably going to happen every season because injuries happen all the time. You have to adjust on the fly. What do we have? How do we change up how we're playing? How do we change up schematically, but also the techniques we're putting guys in, what players are actually getting playing time? All of those things change throughout the season, and it happened again last year just like it did in 2021. As I drop my pen, I'm going to do my best to fly through this. I know you guys want a little bit shorter. I understand that, but there is still some breakdown to this video. So here are the players that we're going to be discussing in today's video on the screen. Again, these are guys that are either under contract or they were with us to finish the season and they're no longer under contract. But there is that one edge rusher that we will discuss, but he is not on this list. So stay tuned for that guy. He's like the mysterious player. You probably already know who he is. Heck, I may have put it in the title. I don't know. I probably already gave it away. Point is, though, we're going to get to that. First off, we have Alim McNeill. Now, the age on the right, that's the number in the parentheses. That is not how old they currently are. They could be that old, but it is their age for the 2023 season, okay? So that's kind of looking forward what their age will be. So for Alim McNeill, he will be 23 years old. But Alim McNeill, just like Levi, as you're going to see on this list, both of those guys just finished their second year. And for Alim, that means he's heading into his third season with the Lions. There will be no fifth-year option as he is a former third-round pick. He has 2 years left, and then after this season, he can negotiate a potential contract extension if the Lions wanted to look that route. His cap number is pretty darn cheap because he's a third-round pick. For this upcoming season, it's only $1.398 million. And then for the next season, it's only $1.632 million. I would say that's probably one of the best deals that we honestly have on this roster. When you take a look at, yeah, it's a rookie deal, but for what we're getting out of it, he has been outstanding for us, and we'll talk about that. Then you have Michael Brockers, probably one of the most intriguing names heading into this offseason. Now, for him, because of his financial situation, it definitely would not surprise me if he's not back on the Lions roster. Also, we did see last season that his role kind of went away after 5 weeks in the season, which we'll discuss when we get to him individually. But again, set to be 32 for next season. This is the final year of his contract, and his cap number is extremely high. Clearly, it was kind of set up like this. So we've seen Brad do this, backload a little bit, but then also give himself a potential out at the end of the contract. Not saying that he will be cut right now. I mean, I think he will be, but there's options too. You know, even if you don't want to keep him on that current contract, you could always potentially look to restructure, which, you know, he doesn't have any years, so I think you'd have to throw void years, or at that point, you'd have to kind of take a pay cut unless you want to keep him under the current contract. But that I doubt because, like I said, his cap hit is just under $14 million for this upcoming season, and you get to save $10 million of that if you decided to cut Michael Brockers, who's only $3.975 being dead cap. So you save a massive amount, $3.975, you eat it, but you're saving $10 million. I mean, heck, that's basically a draft class, depending on how many draft picks you have. So that could be a massive saving for the Lions, and on top of that, he really kind of lost his role through the season last year. Levi You may forgot about him, but don't, because this is one of the Lions' rookie deal players. He's set to be 24 for next season. He just finished up his second year, but he didn't play this past season. He had back surgery, so he didn't play at all. He did play in 2021, so when we break down this player, we'll take a look at what he did in 2021. Completely different schematically than what it was this past season, and on top of that, again, it was back surgery, so I don't know what his health is going to look like. I'm hoping for the best with this guy. It's just really difficult in that sense because I don't know. Regardless, though, still under his rookie deal, same timeline as Alim McNeil. There won't be a fifth-year option next season and the year after that under contract. His cap hit is a little bit more expensive because he was a second-round pick, $2.2 million for this upcoming season, and then at $2.59 million the next season. You could cut him, right? If it came down to that, you could end up cutting Levi. You wouldn't really save anything from that because $1.643 million of the $2.2 million would just be dead cap. So you really wouldn't save much at all, under $600K. All right, continuing, Demetrius Taylor, someone that we brought in this offseason as an undrafted free agent. However, he was signed to a futures deal with the Detroit Lions because I don't think he actually made the roster. So now he was signed to a futures contract, which, as we discussed in the last video, it's kind of just to give them an opportunity to compete in the offseason and potentially earn a role, kind of sticks them around. There is no guarantees in a futures deal contract. It's set at about $870K, somewhere in that range. But again, there's no guarantees to this. So, you know, if you cut him, you don't really lose anything. But it gives him an opportunity to potentially make it back to the roster. And then finally, you have two guys that are set to become free agents here. These are big ones. You have Benito Jones first, who is set to be 26 years old next season, And Benito Jones is an exclusive rights free agent. Reason being is that he has had less than 3 seasons in the NFL, and he is on an expiring contract. So because of that, he's an exclusive rights free agent, which basically means he can't negotiate with any other team if you want to put that tender on him and bring him back, which is set at about $940K. So basically, if the Lions want him back for $940K, they can do it, and he doesn't really have an opportunity to negotiate with anybody else. So it could be a great deal. We've seen that. We've had guys like Jack Fox on exclusive rights deals, and they're fantastic deals because they're not very expensive for the team. Finally, you have Isaiah Buggs, set to be 27, still very young. I mean, every time I look at him, I'm like, that guy's got to be older than that. Point is, though, unrestricted free agent this offseason. He is a guy to keep an eye on. Now, I've seen the reports out there that him, John Kaminsky, and Duracell apparently went to Brad Holmes saying that they would take less money to return. I'm not reporting that. I've just read it. I've heard it. Don't know if it's legit, but I've heard it. So that could be true. They've reportedly said that they would take less to come back to the Detroit Lions because all of those guys are set to be unrestricted free agents this offseason, which means they can negotiate with any team and basically take any deal that they want to take. But apparently they said that they would take less to stay here. So we'll keep an eye on if that's actually the case or not. Point is, though, that is a big one because he played a lot for us this past season, played a very big role for us, and he may be a guy that's in line to get brought back. Okay, so with that, that's a rundown. Now let's take a look at a couple of quick numbers here. Here is the Lions' run defense and pass rushing stats from this past season. Have to make this clear. These stats include everybody. All right, and I try to make this kind of known during last season because it can easily be forgotten. When you look at these run numbers, you just immediately say, that's the interior defensive line. You got to go get a nose tackle or something like that. And it's like, well, hold up. It means everybody. And for the Lions, I think that was as clear as it gets. It meant everybody last year because usually when they struggled against the run, sometimes it was their interior. But a lot of times it was getting gashed towards the outside, losing contain, cornerbacks, whatever it may be, being in a bad spot schematically, Seattle. That's what it was. Meaning that we had games where we were able to keep it from getting to the edges, and obviously that includes a lot of different guys, and yes, the interior plays a part in this, but you had games against guys like Dalvin Cook the second time around where he went 15 carries for 23 yards versus the first time where he went for 96 yards because we let things get to the edge on us a couple of times. Or Saquon Barkley, 15 carries, 22 yards. You're talking about two great running backs that were basically shut down. All right, a game like Carolina, right? You look at that and you may say, man, that's interior. Yeah, there were plays in there, but a majority of them were us being put in the action, our edge defenders put in the action, the read options, the speed options. That's what killed us. It wasn't necessarily consistently the interior. Now, they got us a couple times in there, but that wasn't where we were beat. However, you take a look at the run defense numbers, they're not good at all, and they got to be a lot better than that. 5.3 a carry, 146 yards a game, and then 477 attempts against. That's not good anywhere because the attempts aren't even that high, and you're still giving up tons of yards. Now, the pressure numbers are much better, and according to Brad Holmes, he sounds pretty excited about this edge rusher position, which I am as well, because Lions may not even touch it. I mean, I'm not trying to spoil it, but they may not. I mean, they got a lot of guys under contract, and they got some dogs. And man, just quick side note, I don't want to say I forgot, but it's easy to forget how dominant Charles actually was last season. The dude had 50 pressures, just to put that out, 50 pressures last season. Oh my goodness. Like you just put on the early film and I'm not even looking for him. We just see him popping every play. It's like, dude, that guy was kind of crazy. So I'm excited to see him again this upcoming season. But 23.2% pressure rate, which was 9th in the league, 9.5% hurry rate, which was 2nd. However, we did blow blitz to 7th most in the league. I think a lot of those were 5-man blitzes because you had some games down the stretch where we just put 5 guys across the line, some 3-4 looks, 5-man fronts, and then we just bring 5 guys and have one less underneath zone defender. There was a lot of that, so I'm assuming that kind of pulled that number a little bit. Then on top of that, yeah, on third downs, we're not afraid to blitz either. We're not afraid to go zero coverage. So, we blitzed a lot. That's the moral of the story. And the numbers aren't good enough against the run. That's got to get better, but it wasn't all in the interior defensive line. Some of it was, but it wasn't all. So with that, let's take a look at these players individually on this roster. I'm not sure which order to go in, but we're going to start with Alim McNeil, and it's the same setup as last time. The stats are on the left, the SIS, Sports Info Solutions, those are their numbers. And then also on top of that, at the bottom, you have the Pro Football Focus numbers, and the line across with all the numbers is Pro Football Reference. And then on the right side, I have my pluses, minus some of the key notes that I took away from rewatching this player last season. A lot more notes for guys this time around, I understand. I'm going to try not to go through all of them because we'll be here very long and just point on some key things here. If you have any questions or whatever, throw it in the comments. But point is here, let's start with Alim McNeil first because this guy is an absolute animal. You can see his size, 6'2", 325. I'm sure it fluctuated. But the biggest thing to hit on here with Alim McNeil is his position change basically last season. The Lions do a lot of 2-eye, 3 technique, or a 1 technique, 3 technique, meaning 3 technique meaning outside shade of a guard, 2-eye meaning inside shade of a guard, 2 technique meaning face up with a guard, or 1 technique meaning outside shade of a center. Lions do a lot of the 2-eye and 3. And the biggest change for Alim McNeil that happened and occurred during last season was moving Alim McNeil to the 3 technique more often, meaning, in the words of Todd Walsh, that he would have a 2-way go. And that's exactly why I point out the numbers there. 23 pressures on the season, according to Sports Info Solutions. But 18 of those, 18 of those came from week 7 on. And the reason week 7 matters so much is because that was the week after the bye week. And again, that affects another player on here, Michael Brockers, which we're going to take a look at his snap counts and how much they decreased after week 5, because this was one of the Lions' main changes. Part of this, keep in mind, Michael Brockers, not really a penetrator, not really a guy that gives you a lot of pass rush from the 3 technique or on pass downs. But I think a big result of this, like we've seen the last 2 years, injuries. Big time injuries at the edge rusher position move guys around, which we'll talk about our mystery player. But also on top of that, not having guys like Levi in the fold, which was drafted to be that 3 technique that would get the 2-way go, that would have that first step, that elite first step with heavy hands that could penetrate and just get pushed into the backfield. Not having that guy meant the Lions were trying to still get pressure with their front, but they still had to be able to stop the run. And one guy that, as I mentioned a lot of times during the season, kind of became our Levi for us was Alim McNeil. And that's why I'm just such a big fan of the dude, because it's not easy to do that. The dude's 325, and sure, it sucks fluctuated, 330 pounds. And he played outside of a guard. That's unreal. 7, Dallas is the first time we saw it. It was coming off the bye week. Now, there was a little bit of a transition period, and we're going to take a look at him, and that was Demetrius Taylor. Demetrius Taylor was kind of the merger between the shift for the Lions defensively, meaning that in week 5 against the New England Patriots, the only time we saw Demetrius Taylor this season was when he played New England Patriots. And that was the shift between giving him an opportunity and looks at that 3 technique, and then coming out of the bye week and saying, hey, we're going to put Alim McNeil more in that spot. Now, that also shifts everybody else. Isaiah Buggs, Benito Jones, more Benito Jones. We're going to have to play them more as our nose tackle. Become more of that 3 for us that could hopefully give us some penetration, some push, and get some pass rush potentially as well. And the fact that he could do both is impressive. Also, just the fact that this guy played in every game and started every game is extremely impressive as well. You remember when he went down with an injury and came back in just a few plays later? It's like, that dude is an animal. I don't necessarily think that this is what the vision is going forward, is to have Alim McNeil be the 3 tech. Now, usually for their interior guys this past season, you had to be able to kind of do both, because there would be shifts pre-snap where if you started as a 3, you might shift into a 2-eye based on how the offense adjusted, and your other defensive tackle would have to slide out to a 3 technique. So you would have to shift pre-snap, which meant you had to have the size and ability to basically play both. But the majority of the time, after week 5, he became that for the Lions. That could be a little bit more of that penetrator that could get that two-way go and work on an island against a defensive tackle instead of just having to handle the double teams as consistently as he had to handle at the beginning of the season. But I don't think the vision for him is to be that long-term. I think that was because of where they were at health-wise and because of what they had. They were saying who can do this the best, but then also that affects everybody else. I can't just move him to a spot and have no one that can play his spot. But because of guys like Benito and Isaiah Buggs that could take his spot as more of the nose tackle, it allowed them to shift him to that 3 technique position. And you can see the notes on the right, just a couple ones I have to hit on. Head up pass rusher. This guy is a very aware pass rusher. He'll get his hands in pass lanes, but also he's the guy that you point to when you talk about guys that can jump out on screens, be aware of everything going on. Fast initial hands. He gets his hands on you very quickly, run and pass very quickly. He kind of runs like this. He gets them out quickly, gets his hands on very quickly to blockers. Improve run scheme recognition. This felt like something throughout the season where as the year kind of went on, he got better and better, especially from the backside of his zone run, which meant that he would have to be able to get some penetration but not get blocked off by the backside offensive tackle. A lot of times if you're in a 3-tech, he would have to be able to split that and get penetration into the backfield. And for him, I thought his recognition got better and better, especially after that transition. He started to react a lot quicker to those kind of looks from the offensive perspective, and he got a lot quicker, and he showed that he is athletic enough to handle this, which is again unreal to me that he was just able to do that as well as he could. Now, he still got caught in the design too often. They would attack him with trap blocks. They would get him caught in the design of 2 pulls from the opposite side where he kind of didn't see the entire picture and he just kind of flowed with it, and he would allow it to take him out of the play. Still happened a little bit too often. He's a little bit shorter, a little bit stouter, which I guess could make it a little bit harder to see, but that's also a benefit. Stout build eases pad level. What I mean by that is sometimes he stands kind of straight up, but you can't even tell because his pad level is usually just naturally so low because of his height that he eases the emphasis on him having to stay low, even though he usually does. Has some shake body control, meaning that he can win when he's even. You know, some guys, they have to have a clear step. He can kind of win when he's even, right? When he gets on your hip, he can still get penetration, but at the same time, he has some shake to him, which was so necessary, him moving to the 3. Now, it's definitely not like what they were expecting from Levi and guys like that, but there is a little bit of a shake where he comes into the point of attack where he can make some moves, and big thing that he developed was with that strong inside hand where he could get you on the shoulder along with that shake and body control and then get a step that way. That's something that he really developed as the year went on from the 3-tech. Improved hands and pass rush against Green Bay. You were watching, you're like, this guy looks completely different than what I saw at the beginning of the year. Wins with second effort. A lot of times his go-to was to rip through on the way through. Reason being is that he plays the run first, as all our guys do, right? They say attack, react. They attack the blocker and then they react. So for him, he wins off that second effort, which is good and bad, but it definitely showed the improvements of his hands because if his hand usage wasn't there, he wasn't going to get pressure. And I think that was, we'll talk about Levi, I think that was an issue last season, even though it was different schematically, is that even if you engage originally and you play the run, then you have to find a way to disengage separately and then get after the quarterback a lot of times on play action, things like that. And for him, and because these aren't obvious pass downs that Alim's usually on the field, for him, he was able to do that. I mean, there was a time where the Lions were using Alim on pass downs like this, right over the center in a 0-tech, and to do these stunts. And to do that, you have to have a little of that twinkle toes that he has. That's why they call him that. That is slither for a guy at that size to get even and then split and get through. It's unreal. The fallback to that is he doesn't usually win immediately and get pressure immediately. It does take a pass rush move for him to get that step and penetrate. He also isn't the best finisher, best closing ability either, which just makes sense. Spin setups, he still looks a little weird trying to set up the spin, but it also just showcases the athleticism when he uses one of those. He did that at NC State, but it's still not that clean yet. Still working on that counter, and I think playing 3-tech more, you started to see it come out a little bit. Feet leave the ground into contact. This is more so playing the run. Maybe his feet get a little bit behind him, but when he gets into contact and he's only has 1 foot on the ground, and that causes him to get moved out. And then finally on top of that, falls to knee trying to twist. When you're trying to engage and turn your body, that way you can end up holding up against a double team. There were a pretty good amount of occasions where he would try to twist and hold up and his inside knee would kind of buckle and go to the ground, and then he would just be shoved out of the play, and at that point he had no leverage. But what I like about Alim is I look at him as a full complete package. Like, this is the type of dude that literally can play from a 0 to 3 pretty darn comfortably. But as I said, I think the vision for him is that he is your nose tackle going forward. It's just a circumstance of what the Lions were dealing with last season, and that is important because that impacts how you address this offseason in terms of what do you think you need at interior defensive line. Continuing, we're going to take a look at a guy that I just absolutely loved watching play last season. I mean, first off, can we just give a little bit of clap to that scouting department? The fact that they're finding dudes like this, I mean, it's just like right before the season, oh, we need some help, let's go get this guy, and then it's like, he's not just there. He's legitimately solid, all right? He's not elite, but he's solid. Like, you can win with that dude. Isaiah Buggs. All right, he's listed at 6'3", 295. Even though I don't know if I necessarily believe he's only 295. I mean, maybe he's a little bit leaner than Alim McNeil looks. With that though, he started 13 of the 17 games he played. Again, super impressive that he played all the games. You can see the stats on the left. Pass rushes where PFF loved him the most. Even though I don't know if I necessarily loved him there, he can do it. 13 hits, which is pretty impressive. And you look at his stats on the right. Again, he is someone that's impacted by that shift. There are clearly some things that he does really well and some things that definitely need work. But what he does well, woo, he does well now, okay? That's why I put it at the top. Hand usage, quickness, flowing to scrape the defensive line. That is the biggest thing for me. He wins with his hands at such a high rate. I wish there was a way you could track that. He wins at such a high rate with his hands. It's unbelievable. You would think this dude's a round one pick. But from that 2-eye, from that more nose tackle position where he got double teams, his ability to win with his hands is what separated him and made him as dominant as he was. Green Bay was obviously a great example because that first goal line stretch, back-to-back plays was like shed making plays. But throughout the entire season, I saw that. I thought maybe it was just like a flash. Not at all. Every single game at such a high rate, he's shedding. And what you notice is his fantastic hand usage, hand placement that he has, also hand quickness to react that allows him to be free to kind of flow along the defensive line and kind of just work off offensive linemen, scrape the offensive line. And that was such a key component for him when playing as a front side, especially against zone blocks when they would try to get that combo block to him and kick up to the second level, is that he could shed the first guy. If he could shed the first guy and he could split your two offensive linemen because of that, now all of a sudden you have nowhere to go. You're running right into that man. And that was key for him, but he did it at such a high level. Body strength. This dude packs a little bit of a punch, okay? He does. He's got some power. And I think that ties into exactly with great hand usage placement, but his ability to just kind of throw guys. I mean, literally, just upper body alone, just move people. Dude's got tree trunks for arms. Slanting versus zone is one of his better traits as well. Against zone runs, if you slant your defensive lineman, you can have success. Lions like to do that with their slot and blitz them off the edge. Slanting versus zone, slanting versus as a pass rusher as well. Pass lane awareness. Honestly, I feel like I'm kind of lying if I said that this isn't something that everybody does, but he is one of the best at it. You know, pass lane awareness, getting his hands up in pass lanes. I think a part of it is also just how he plays and understanding himself, but he does a really good job of getting his hands up. And even when you see him doesn't actually touch it or get accounted for it, he's usually in a position where he's affecting the ball. He was counted for 2 passes, either deflected or batted this past season, according to SIS, but he does it at a really high level. High energy, that's what he is. He's just a high energy player. He's fired up all the time. I love watching the dude. And he handles one-on-ones versus the run because of his ability to shed at a pretty high level. Now, here's some of the knocks, though. Backside zone reach. Okay, so we're talking about that 3 tackle Alim could play. Alim is a ridiculous athlete. Buggs, he wasn't always consistently on that from the backside. There was times where he would get sealed off and he couldn't get to the backfield from that backside. And I don't know if it was a recognition thing, but he was kind of laid off the line, a little bit slower, didn't have that first quick initial twitch to him, which made him a little bit limited on the backside. It made him pretty much a better front side player, in my opinion. Body control to finish, all right? We talk about slither when finishing as a pass rusher, but he doesn't really have that. So a lot of times, even if he got pushed, he wouldn't really be able to change directions and finish side by side with someone. He couldn't always separate from that point. He might just get there and kind of halt, but that was basically it. There wasn't a ton of great body control there. Loses pass rush lanes. This one, it feels like, I'm not sure if I feel great about putting this one there, but at the same time, because one thing that he kind of became for us, I think a lot more than anything, was sort of a contained player more than a pass rush player, which is one of my knocks, even though he can get some pressures because of his hands, and usually he could win immediately and then get there, and that's how he got pressures. But he did, I think, a lot of times become a little bit more of a contained player at the top, where he was just kind of sitting there putting his hands up, and that's why he had so many passes, I think, that he could get in the way of, because he kind of became that. I think he understood himself. He didn't really win with the second effort and things like that. So for him, it was like, all right, if I didn't win, now I kind of drop back, contain. And I thought a couple times he lost the pass rush lanes, but I think that goes back to body control again. Loses base and double teams. Must shed. It's hit and miss. Less squat. He plays a little bit high, but at the same time, again, the shedding's important. He must shed. If he sheds, he's going to shut it down. But if he doesn't, now you can see him start to get moved, pop up a little bit, and then get kind of pushed out of the play by a combo block. I think he's a little bit less of a guy that plays behind the line of scrimmage, I think, than you would like to see. He's more of a play at the line of scrimmage or a few yards in front, and then he can shed and penetrate based on that. But in terms of just moving you backwards, I don't think you saw that as often, especially against zone runs, but that's a completely completely different skill set. Hands too high, as I said, there were times where he's working with the flow and his hands would get up on the chin of an offensive lineman, and obviously that's a problem because you're not going to get any movement, but also you can get called for flags as well. And then, like I said, late first step as a front side zone defender as well, and that would give up ground when you get off the line late and he's trying to get contact and then hold his ground to it. He couldn't really do that because if he got late, then he's not in a good spot. Now he's just moved out of the play and he kind of shut him down and shut out his ability to shed. But that's something that he does super well, and it's just so easy to forget how young he is and how he still needs opportunities to keep getting reps. I'm very impressed with Isaiah Buggs, though. I love his energy, and you know I'm on board with, like, re-sign this dude, especially if he's saying I'd take less. He's got enough versatility, and he plays the game the right way. He's a smart and heady player. There were times where you would just see him literally adapt to something he's seen before and shut it down. Like, he would just break his assignment and be like, I know where this is going. It was rare. It were flashes, but there were flashes of that. There were flashes of him scraping the line and be like, I'm finding the ball, and it was like, that's unreal. He's got it. He's got the ability, man. I think you want to re-sign this guy. Continuing then with Benito Jones, one of the guys that I loved even more than I did during the regular season. I think this guy doesn't get enough credit, honestly. Rewatching, I was like, this guy don't get enough credit. He didn't start any games. He played 311 defensive snaps, though, and he was another big piece of when Alim kicked the three, could someone step in and play nose? And while he rotated, he could do it for us. And man, I think this dude is extremely underrated. And because he's an exclusive rights free agent, it is a no-brainer to me that you pick up the tender, all right? And then you see what happened. Maybe he doesn't make the team, but you pick it up. You absolutely pick it up to me with this player, unless they have a different vision for how this is going to look schematically because of health and certain guys on the edge rusher position, which we'll talk about. But aside from that, if it looks like it did last year, you got to pick that thing up. Aside from the numbers for a second, what I love about this dude is he has the best first step of any interior player I think that we have. I'm talking the Alim McNeils, the Bugs. I'm talking maybe not probably not Demetrius, but Demetrius is a little bit of a different animal. But for a guy that's 330 pounds, remember when we picked him up, right, from Miami? Lions said we need girth, so they picked up Benito Jones. And they needed girth. The reason they needed girth is because they needed guys that could play nose, because they knew they didn't have Levi, so they were going to have to probably kick Alim, because they originally came with Brockers playing that role. Brockers wasn't really impacting the game like that, so they put Alim at that spot. Then they went to nose tackle, and who could play nose? That's not Brockers. Brockers can't play nose. So the Lions said we need girth. So Benito Jones, welcome to the squad, and he has such an elite, I'm talking like great, maybe not elite, I'll say great first step, and it is consistent as heck. Quick reflexes to oncoming blocks. This guy plays with twitch that you wouldn't expect from a dude this big. Great body control. The guy could change directions better than a lot of dudes. Like, I'm talking, it played into his pursuit because he could be behind a play, kind of twist around. I mean, it's not like he had this bend or anything like that, but he could control himself. He wouldn't just fall. If someone ran by him, he wasn't just going to fall on the ground. He could actually change directions to get into the play. Penetration, one gap. He is a pure penetration man that can fill a gap instantly, but also get that knockback. He can get some knockback. On top of that, quickly gets into a sprinter stance as a pass rusher, and that's what gave guards and centers problems. So fast he could get into 3-point stance to becoming a sprinter was insane, and he was a lot of times the first guy off the line. I mean, you talk about very explosive first step and touchdown pursuit. Knox, I have hit and miss hands. I think you kind of had some hit and miss there in his first punch timing. Just a hand placement that you would see with this first punch, which would get him into some problems. That ties in with hand placement, but also I'm tying in hand placement there as a pass rusher as well. And then on top of that, higher base versus run. He gets a lot of penetration, but he does get a little bit of a higher base. And then there were occasions where I think the first guy play that comes to mind is Carolina. This dude was just rolled back like 7 yards. He can absolutely play. He either plays behind the line of scrimmage or he plays way back because he would get pushed off the line. I think more often than not, though, he was honestly the guy playing behind the line of scrimmage because the kind of push that this guy can legitimately get. Counter pass rush moves. This is probably one of the things I said just work singles. That's kind of how he plays right now. And even to that, there isn't really much of a pass rush plan seemingly. He kind of just works singles. He basically jabs an offensive lineman back, gets in that sprinter stance, explodes through, speed to power, and then he kind of just jabs you back. And it works. It kind of does. But there's not a lot off of that. And I think there could be some with his body control. Like, I think there could be a little bit more to that he could add. I think his hands just need work, things like that. Still a very young player, but he just kind of works singles right now as a pass rusher. But still, he would collapse the pocket from time to time because of that penetration that he could just get off the line. I will also add, aside from the single jabs, he does do a nice job of being, if he's locked out, looking for the chop down, or also looking to lift up the arms of the offensive lineman as one of his go-tos as well. Those are kind of the three. Tying the speed to power. I loved me some Benito Jones big time last year. I become such a big fan of this dude. I'm sitting there like, man, could this be the dude for us? Like, this guy is awesome. I love this dude, and I understand, like, there's probably going to be limitations here, understood, but for his size and athleticism, you just don't find that. And he wasn't bad. Like, he shut down plays, and other times he get blown back. It was a little bit hit and miss, but that's anticipated with when you picked him up, what you were expecting to get. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of upside here for an exclusive rights deal where it's not like I'm paying him $5 million. I mean, we're talking about less than $1 million to put that tender. I would do it. I would absolutely do it. Now that brings you on to let's do this first. Let's hit Demetrius because it's not going to take too long. I don't have a ton here. Demetrius only played 13 defense snaps, and as I say, like, this is based on the past season, and you can see there's no really stats to take a look at here. Used on passing situations, those are his numbers. But I say that meaning merger between Alim and the 3-tech. Week 5, that's the game he played with New England. He was the merge. He was the guy, because remember when the Lions elevated him, we're like, ooh, what are the Lions going to do with this? What is their plan? And it turned out he was kind of that merger player where they were like, okay, we're going to try to give you some reps at 3-tech, and we're going to see what it looks like. I didn't think it looked bad, to be completely honest with you. I really didn't think it looked bad. He looked like he was playing a little bit fast. Pass rush quickness, which was pretty ideal when he was ever out there on pass downs. He could, slide inside, and he could kind of line up outside. He's a very legitimate slant rushing potential because, again, we remember coming out, this is another guy, has very natural leverage and quickness off the line, and you can see that's what I hit with. Very natural leverage. He's automatically under your pads immediately. He's like 6'1", 290 is what he came out as draft as, listed as 6'1", 295. 6'1" is very short for a defensive tackle, yet his athleticism allowed him to look kind of natural from kicking out on passing downs. He looked like he was playing a little fast, which is completely understood, being that it was his first snaps in the NFL. On top of that, double team blocks. Like, you'll have to find a spot for him, and it'll definitely have to work schematically. But at the same time, the things that you were excited about potentially coming out, I thought he showed in flashes there against New England: athleticism, leverage, and quickness. I'm intrigued by this one because now he's got the futures deal. He could make the roster. I think it's the perfect thing for him because it's like, hey, we'll let you compete. Don't know exactly what the scheme's going to look like because it depends on the offseason, but we're going to let you compete because we know the athlete's there. We know coming out of college, this was a guy that was a mature player coming out, and on top of that, he had a lot of reps in his back pocket, and he played across the entire defensive line. The guy was playing as a 5 at 290. It's like, that's not right. I know it's App State, but my goodness, that's not right. That's the kind of athlete he is, and he actually showed it, and he kind of looked the part a little bit in the NFL. Now, going from there, here's where things get very, very, very interesting. Actually, should we do that yet? Actually, hold up. Let me do one more. Let's go Michael Brockers first, because this one I'm not going to spend too long on either. I'm trying to fly through these. Y'all get me? Okay, Michael Brockers, real quick. Here he is. You can see his stats on the left. Really nothing stands out here. He didn't play a ton, though, either. Like I said, the first 5 weeks of the season, it was Michael Brockers. Then it was kind of not Michael Brockers. Then he saw him at the end of the year, and that was it. Very long stretch where there was a lot of time Michael Brockers was just a healthy scratch. He lost his role as Alim really kicked to becoming the 3, and we started using Bugs and Benito and rotating the nose tackle there, and even sometimes, Alim would rotate. When that became the case, he kind of lost his role. Now, the Lions also played a different schematic way, which we'll talk about in the next guy, but he kind of lost his role. And I don't think he'll be brought back. You can see some of my notes, and this is just based on last year that I took away. His hand swipe, he does have a way to win with his hands. He knows how he wins as a pass rusher. And even though he doesn't really have necessarily the great close or the bend, he knows how to disengage. He knows how to dislodge, at very least, as a pass rusher, even though he's never historically been much of a pass rushing presence. Quick blocking scheme recognition. You can tell he's smart. You can tell he's very smart. And even on the fly, if he makes a mistake, he can adjust himself very quickly and position himself well. He has fantastic lockout length, which means when he gets connection, he can push you out of the play and lock you out, and that's huge against zone runs. I thought his pad level was a little bit too high. He's naturally very high, so that can happen. 6'5", but his pad level was pretty inconsistent. And then he had a slower first step, a later first step. Definitely a smart player, though, for us. It feels like he won't be brought back, but I do enjoy Michael Brockers, and I got to believe he was huge for that locker room. I know what he's done off the field. We've seen those videos with him bringing the defensive lineman in, working with them. That can't be taken for granted. So I don't think it's worth not saving $10 million to keep that around if he's not going to play very much. But I think also at the same time, we have to appreciate what he did do for this defense in terms of off the field, because all that stuff does matter, and I think it helped these guys fast. I mean, you think the cornerbacks could have used that? I think so. I think they could have used a guy like that where it was like, hey, we can just look up to you. They could definitely use that. The D-line had that, and I think it was very beneficial for them to have that calming presence in the locker room that they had. But also on top of that, he's a very smart player, and he has the athletic tools. I just think for him, he's probably on his way out. Now, things get interesting. And I'm going to make it interesting. I'm going to start with a player that is considered a interior defensive lineman, but it's hard because he didn't play last season. We're going to start with Levi. Levi is interesting. So take a look at his things on the left here. He had back surgery this past season. He had a back injury heading into, I believe it was the 2021 training camp. He missed a lot of time for us. Then 2021, he did play in 16 games. He started none of them. You can see his stats on the left. I mean, it's not terrible, I guess. It's not really anything impressive there, but whatever. PFF grades aren't good, especially against the run, and I don't think that's inaccurate at all. Here's the thing with Levi. 2021 did not play to his skill set. I'm not just saying this. It's easy to just say that and be like, well, he didn't produce, so they didn't play him right. Legitimately, it did not play to his skill set at all. This was a guy coming out that was a pure 3 technique, penetrating, heavy hands defensive lineman. That's what he was. If you remember, that's what he was, explosive as heck, and he would penetrate. That's what he was. And he had inconsistent pad level. He had hit and miss hands, but he was that. He was that. We thought rotational, he'll become that, and he could become that. Baby Donald is what kind of the name we threw out there. That's not at all what he played in 2021. The Lions, remember last year, kind of became that read and react type of team. They became much more read and react the last year, where techniques were different, a lot more face-up alignments to technique, for technique, which meant face-up with the guard, face-up with the tackle. So now you're not shading, and on top of that, it was much more read and then react. It was way less attack like we do now and then react off it. Still, we don't just shoot gaps, but we attack gaps a little more. That was not attacking gaps at all, because 2I and a 3, those are both shades. 2 and a 4 are not shades at all, and that's what a lot of 2021 was for Levi. So 1, it didn't play to his strengths at all. It helped nothing for him in that sense. And I think that was the excitement heading into this year, because you're like, man, if this guy's healthy, you look at it and you say, I really want to see what it looks like. And that's one thing I think I talked about in the offseason. Like, I really want to see what it looks like in a scheme that makes sense for him. But unfortunately, we didn't get to see him. So you just have to look at that year. Now, some things definitely popped. Legit first step twitch. That's obvious. I mean, it was hit and miss, but it was obvious that he had legit first step juice. Heavy hands at point of attack. Maybe my favorite part. Legitimate knockback. Like, you could see him move dudes backwards. Seattle didn't have a great game against Seattle, but you could see when he got contact, he could just push guys backwards. Even without the strongest base, upper body-wise, he had knockback. He packed a punch, man. And that's what I put. He has knockback. I got a lot of knocks. Needed a stronger base, which is something that if you remember, in Seattle I point out, but if some remember, Todd Walsh said, this guy's got to get under the squat bar. He needs a stronger base for us. Not initiating the attack enough. Late offensive line scheme reaction. Okay, so sometimes I thought his recognition to the scheme was a little bit late, and it caused him to be a little bit late to the play and be out of position. Late hands as a pass rusher. The first punch, this was weird, man. His pass rush plan is probably the best way to say it. Didn't really seem like he had a plan to win, and sometimes he did. Sometimes it looked like he did. It looked a little predetermined, not necessarily based on what the offense would show him. So there wasn't like a pure counter to it. It wasn't like, oh, he hit me with this, wait till I hit him with this. There wasn't that. It was more like, here's my plan, I'm going for it, and that's kind of what it was for him. It seemed like as a pass rusher. Still then, the only pure really pass rush opportunities he had was based on passing downs alone, because when you got him into early downs, he had to play the run first. So he set to play the run, and then he had to rush off of that. And there was really unfortunately, I didn't see like much success at all being able to counter off of the run stop first, shed, and then get to the quarterback. If anything, coming out, that was a knock. It was more of a dislodge guy than a shed guy. Understandable, because that's not, you kind of knew that coming out that he wasn't that. But when you're asking him to read and react like that, it's kind of what you get. And it didn't look great for him. Pad level. This as the play rolls on, he starts to pop up. And that comes as a pass rusher too. He can explode, get in that sprinter stance and get a lot of push. But then as the play rolls on, he kind of stands up. And with no counter move, it takes him out of the rep. And the same thing happens against the run as well. Very hit and miss in terms of and more miss than in having good pad level or pad leverage against the run as well. Way too often he was just pushed out of the play. His hand placement accuracy was very hit and miss. Like, he would have late hands as a pass rusher. His plan didn't know he's looked there, and at the top of that, his counter wasn't there. So for me, it was unfortunate because he was a rookie. You knew he was raw. He opted out his final season in college. And on top of that, the scheme did not make sense at all for him. But it's because of where we were at as a team, we had to do these things. But then you take a look and you said, okay, what can it look like this year? And I'm very excited for it. If he would have been able to play that 3 tech, I don't think Alim would have ever went to that spot if he was what we thought he would be. Alim would have never probably went to the 3 tech, because that would have been Alim McNeil at nose, and he would have just stayed there. The issue, however, is that he wasn't healthy. So it forced the Lions to adjust. And initially they came in and said, we'll just have Brockers do it. And that didn't look great. So they're like, all right, we're going to shift this thing up. We're not getting any penetration. We got to try Alim there. And Alim could handle it. So they're like, look, we're going to do that, and you're going to be our nose. So for me, Very big questions because I don't know what he's with health with. He had back surgery, and I know it's very difficult because now it's going to be tough to work out. You're just trying to rehab, and we know how tough that is. You're not really getting better. You're just trying to get healthy. So I'm hoping for the dude because I do think he's more of a tools guy. He's a flash tools guy. That's what he was coming out. So the tools are still there. I hope, we don't know what he's looking like coming back from an injury, but that could obviously affect how you approach this draft. If you're saying we need another guy like that, we need another 3-tech, well, you also have to keep in mind where you think about this, and if you don't feel like he's going to be healthy or you're worried about it, you can still address it high. And finally, this is where I want to tie it all together before our final thoughts here, and this is with the mystery player. This is Josh Paschal. Now, I'm not including him. We'll probably talk about him in the edge rusher video as well, but here's why I'm saying he's a mystery fit. I don't know the plan with him. We may have already seen it, and it definitely may have, and it makes sense. But I think there's a potential that we don't know his exact fit. You can see there are numbers there, and that's from this past season. 16 combined tackles, only 1 missed tackle, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. I think the most exciting thing about Josh is everything that we thought he would be, he was. He literally was everything I think you would thought he would be from a tools perspective in terms of the situations that he was put in. Everything that you hoped that he would be, he looked like. On the right, let's talk about this. He was used in 5-man fronts. So the other schematic thing we did, 5-man fronts, we saw it against teams like Chicago, heavy run teams where we'd have 5 guys across the line, sometimes with 3-4. What they rarely ever did was play him as that 3 technique in that Alim role. When he was in the game, he would rotate with John Kaminsky, and this is when you saw him play the 4-eye, 4, or a 6 technique. He usually rotated between those, sometimes a 5, a base end. But that's usually the techniques that he played, which meant face up over a tackle, inside shade of a tackle, or face up with a tight end. You saw a lot of that, meaning playing on the strong side because he was face up with their tight end. He was not playing the 3. Alim McNeill would play the 3. So he would play like a 4 or 4-eye. Alim would play the 3, and then you'd have your nose tackle, who is also on the field, and that would be Bugs or Benito Jones. That's the role he played. He never really played the 3 for us. The only time he did is when he was obvious pass downs, and then he would kick inside, which is what his projection was coming out of the draft. He would kick inside, and he could rush over the guard. The great thing about him is he was literally everything that you kind of thought he could be. Powerful punch, very powerful punch. I'm talking maybe more powerful than Levi's. Leverage, most impressive trait. We talk about leverage a lot. He is an absolute, I think PFF said leverage demon. That's what he is. I call him a bowling ball. This dude wins leverage all the time. And he did it again last year. He did it all the time, winning the leverage battle with that immediate punch and immediate contact, and he has explosive get off. Who does that sound familiar to? Levi? The top 3 traits are basically the exact same top 3 traits that Levi had coming out. Powerful punch and explosive get off. The only difference is leverage. All right, Levi's leverage is hit and miss. Aside from that, the other 2 are exactly the same basically in terms of his skill set. Here's the biggest difference. Size. He came out listed at 268. Reportedly he's like 275. I'm not sure. Point is, that's the biggest difference. And depending on what the Lions' vision is for what they want this to look like schematically will affect a lot. The schematic way he was used was playing the strong side edge when Kaminsky was hurt. So when Kaminsky was hurt, you saw 2 games in there at the beginning of the season, Dallas and Miami, where he became the strong side edge. He would play stand-up, and that's where he would be put in the action. Sometimes it was a problem when he had to play in that role, stand-up, things like that. But he would still play a 6 and things like that, or 9. Could he play that Levi 3 technique role for the Lions? Could they see him doing that? Well, he'd have to probably put on weight because that's where he's lacking is size to be that. Now, if the Lions are coming in and say we're going to play this like last year, we want to play the 2-eye, we want to play a 3, and then we'll have, our stand-up edge rushers, or maybe not even stand-up, but we'll have 2 defensive ends and our 2 linebackers because a lot of times you're in sub-package now anyways, and that's what we're going to look like. At that point, is he your 3 technique? Could he be that for the Lions? Does he have to put in a little weight? I would think so. But he definitely has the traits in terms of two-way go, being able to win with his first step, and being able to beat guards. This one of his biggest knocks I didn't love about him. He couldn't win the edge very often. He couldn't really win the edge a lot of ways. So when you saw him play the edge against a team like Chicago, the reason they would rush him off the edge isn't because, they thought that was the best matchup to win, is because he doesn't win around, he wins through. He wins through offensive tackles. So they put him on the edge, that way he would squeeze the pocket. Because if you try to work outside, now there's a lot of space that you're giving Justin Fields to take off. So for them, they would put him there, just like they put Kaminsky there. And the reason being, I understand it now, is because they were trying to collapse the pocket with those guys, because they know those 2 aren't going to win around very often. They're winning through the tackles because that's how they win in college. They win with power. They don't win off the edge. They don't have the bend. They just don't have that. At least right now, they don't have that, and I think he's very limited in that fact anyway. Pass rush hand usage, stringing pass rush moves together is still something that's going to have to be developed. Again, if the first one doesn't win, can he string something off it naturally? And then lateral movement picked on the edge. That was when he was in stand-up, when they would run read options towards him, and he just looked a little unathletic there. He didn't look right there, and he kind of looked like, oh, he's exposed. It's like, no, he just has a different build. But when you watch him as a 4-eye, you're like, oh, okay, that guy looks like a problem. He's shocking back tackles. Watch him as a 6, just jumping on tight ends, getting into the backfield, playing behind the line of scrimmage often. So the reason I call him mystery fit is because what is the vision for a guy like this? What is it? Is it that, hey, we're going to use him as a 4-eye, from a 4-eye to a 6 tech, and that's where we want him. We want him around the offensive tackle in that role. And if you do that, what that allowed them to do is when they played that 5-man front on base downs against teams like Chicago, they could put him on the field as a 4-eye, for example, Alim McNeill as their 3, and then their nose tackle, let's say, was Benito. Then what they would do is they would put Hutch and then James Houston off the edge because Houston gave more athleticism. They could put, again, just adjusting to who they had healthy. So I'm most intrigued here because if they feel like there's a chance that he could kick inside, put on some weight. If he was reportedly 278 and he could put on 10 pounds and then kick inside while keeping some of that athleticism, because we know literally he played down the entire defense line in college. NFL's a little different, but if he can do that, it changes up the draft impact. Also, if they feel like he can do it now, it changes up the draft impact because I know he's a little bit undersized, but think about it like this. Aaron Donald coming out. He's like your prototypical 3-tech, 286 at the combine. This guy, 268, but he was reportedly 275 at a point. So if that's the case, there is potential that he could slide there. Or is the vision that, hey, what he is a 4, he's going to play around the tackle, and then at the same time, on pass downs, we'll kick him inside. Because it's not as much to me about a concern of interior defensive line of, oh, the Lions need interior rushers for third down. They don't need that to me. They have that. Whether that's Kaminsky coming back, who also reportedly said he would take less, as well as Alex Angeloni. Whether that's Kaminsky, whether that's Josh Paschal, they have guys that can rush from the interior on obvious pass downs. A lot of guys can. But on early downs, could Paschal become that for the Lions? I think it's extremely intriguing because of his skill set that it's possible that he could do that for the Lions. But he didn't do it last year. You can see the stats. From a 0-3 technique, he only took 14 snaps and only 1 rushing snap, which meant that he basically never played that technique against the run, only on passing situations. So what is the vision for Josh Paschal? Could he have a potential to kick inside there? And if that's the case, it changes everything about how you approach this draft. Because here's my vision. If you're saying what is the big need here, I think for the Lions, what you have to look at as the primary need to me, and I bounced around between this, do they need the big run-stopping nose tackle? Do they need this, they need that? Assuming that they have the same vision for Paschal, I think they have to look at getting that attacking 3-tech again. The kind of vision they have for Levi. Now, I say that. I'm not saying get a guy that's 270, because if you're doing that, you could just put Josh Paschal there. My thing is, if you can put a guy that's 270 at 3-tech, Josh Paschal could kick in, and all of a sudden this need becomes way different. Because now if Levi's coming back healthy, he could be your backup. You could still address it, but it's not the same need because Josh could start there because he has a skill set to absolutely do it, to win the leverage, get less double teams, have a two-way go, have the quick first step, win the leverage battle very often, plays his own run. But to me, if that's not the case, which it seems likely it's probably not, they need a guy with still some girth to him because he's going to occasionally get double teams. If it's like it was last season, you need a guy that's probably at least in that 290, 295 range, which is exactly where Levi hit. A lot of our guys, what is their weight? 290, 295. You need a DT in that range that has the elite athleticism and explosiveness because that's the one thing we lacked last year due to injury. And the biggest guy that brings that, if not Paschal, is Levi. And not knowing what Levi's health is, it's hard to say, and they know better than I do. So they didn't miss guys that could stop the run. They missed that. And I think the biggest thing is not just that, it's also putting Alim McNeil back as a nose tackle, allowing Bugs to then become rotational again if he's re-signed. Benito to become rotational. 2 guys that can flip between the 2 on early downs. But when Bugs is out there over and over and over, I don't love his pad level. Alim, Bugs, that's a beautiful rotation at nose. And if you get a 3 that can penetrate with some girth at 290, 295, now we're onto something. 270, I don't think so, because then I could just put Josh Paschal there. I mean, we're trying to figure out when we draft basketball, we're like, what is this dude's role? That could be his role if you feel like you could put a guy with that size. And maybe they change up schematically and they're saying they can. I kind of doubt it, though. I think we saw a lot of what the Lions' vision was last year. They just didn't have the personnel for it necessarily at all times of the season. And what they're lacking is that. When Ty Walsh was asked, could this be Alim McNeil as a 3-tech, he said, honestly, I don't know. To me, it's not necessarily the long-term goal for him or plan for him. He can do it, though. That's awesome. It's great to have that flexibility. But I think that's the plan for him is he's going to be more of a nose. That's when Brad drafted him. He's the only pure nose tackle left. That's what he is. And he's a shade tackle, nose tackle. But we find that dog 3-tech. Can that be Levi? Could they go small and put Josh there? That's the biggest questions to me. I would absolutely pick up the tender on Benito Jones. I would aim to re-sign Isaiah Buggs because I think those guys have a lot in the tank. Would cut Michael Brockers, so I have those 3. Demetrius Taylor would come back in terms of he'd compete. Not necessarily, I don't know if he's going to make the roster. Let's just assume Levi's healthy enough to compete this offseason, so he's on the roster. And then my number 5, if I'm going that new addition, if we're going big time, I'd go get that 3-tech. I'd go in for that 3-tech. I think there's a scenario where you say, hey, we like Alim here, or Josh could be here. Then we go look at a nose tackle, and maybe the lead becomes a little bit less because usually you don't have to jump that high. But to find a penetrating 3-tech that can also have some girth is not easy to find, and that's where the investment comes in. It doesn't take a lot to invest in just a big 340-pound dude that stands there like this and doesn't get pressure. We want guys that can attack, and that's why Alim got shifted there because Brockers wasn't giving it to us. He can. There's a need. If that's the biggest need, find that guy. So, scenario, possibility, Alim McNeil, let's say we cut Brockers, Levi's still here, Taylor's there, and pick up the exclusive rights free agent for Jones. Now we have the 28th most expensive interior defensive line heading into next season. That's extremely cheap, under $10 million. Biggest thing there, that does not include Isaiah Buggs. I don't think Buggs will be super expensive, and reportedly he said he'd take less. If that's the case, maybe you're pushing 12 million. Let's just say conservatively you're pushing 12 million. That's extremely cheap. Throw a draft pick, even if it was your 6th pick in the draft. You're only looking at about $16-17 million for that entire positional group. I don't doubt Brad Holmes will address this again because that's just what he does. Just to put it in perspective, Michael Brockers on this roster, your spending for the position would then be $17.5 million, which is only 21st, so it's still not a ton. But that's still more than the scenario of a potential draft pick where you're looking at over $5 million, about 5.2. So let's say 5 to that, 14.5, 14.6 plus Isaiah Buggs. It could put you less. It could be a smaller cap hit or basically the same cap hit as keeping Michael Brockers and not having the top draft pick or having Isaiah Buggs back. So to me, that's the move I'm making. And if you're talking about what do we need, the need level is probably to go get that 3-tech, but I'm not completely sure because I don't know what the vision is. Keep an eye on Pascal. Don't forget that name because I think he has a skill set that's very intriguing, especially if his weight fluctuates or they change up schematically. But I think the vision is kick Alim the nose tackle, and we'll rock from there. If the Lions get a dog 3-tech, this defensive line looks really solid. Benito and Buggs is legit. That is a legit rotational. I don't want him as a starter, but if I had Buggs as rotational and he's fresh, oh my gosh. And because of the flexibility between those two, they can hang as a 3. They just don't get the penetration. But if I address that, say in the draft or free agency, now all of a sudden I have Levi healthy because I don't think you want to, even if Levi's healthy, you can't say he's going to be my starter. He's going to be a backup, I would say, because of his injury, and he'll be rotational. He still needs areas to work. But if that new guy and him were my rotational 3s, this D-line's tough. Considering what we already have edge, stop it. I'm going to leave it there, man. Hopefully that made sense. If it didn't, let me know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, man. That would be difficult. And yeah, veterans also an option. I think it is. But I think it's just more likely that you go the young way and you say, hey, this D-line, let's just keep it young. Let's just build this thing through the draft like we say. And I think it could be all the way up to your top pick in the draft. I mean, it would be a very complete defensive line. Hypothetically, one of the top defensive tackles that could play 3 in this draft. And then you had Alim. And then you had that depth of Buggs and Benito, and then you have an edge rusher position pretty much filled out. That would be a ridiculous front. I mean, that would be a ridiculous front line. You still have that first-round pick to mess around with for cornerback, like our last video. And that doesn't necessarily mean to be your 6th pick. It could be a free agent. You could do less. Remember, Levi was a 2nd-round pick. Alim was a 3rd-round pick. So you could find a beyond that. But, yeah, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt Brad Holmes will address this again. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Pride, for watching, and I'm out.